Hello and welcome. You're watching the Saturday edition of This Is Exclusive with me, Shavin Sen. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we come to you with two international stories which have got repercussions across the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, first to begin with, what's really happening in Asia's fourth largest economy in South Korea, given the fact that there's been a tumultuous time in that very place. The impeachment which began threatened the entire process, and now the fragility of the South Korean democracy exists. We'll get you a ground reporter coming in from South Korea. Not just that, the other big challenging time for the Assad regime, and how exactly will Russia basically respond to. Tonight on This Is Exclusive, we also put the spotlight on the civil war in Syria. All this and much more in this edition of This Is Exclusive. But up first, let's take you through the headlines we're tracking at this hour. After a controversial martial law, South Korean President Yoon survives impeachment bid in parliament.
Colleagues, the United States is closely monitoring the situation in Aleppo and Idlib and are in contact with partners on the ground.
Amid the recent escalation in Syria, US issues a statement says closely monitoring the situation in Syria. BJP questions Congress and George Soros link. Mahesh Jethmalani says Congressman is an unabashed apologist for George Soros. Fadnavis's claim on foreign meddling jitters the opposition. Mahavikas Aghadi says all allegations are baseless. Rift widens in the India alliance. Mamata says she is ready to take over. The India alliance leader BJP takes a Ladies and gentlemen, we start this edition of This Is Exclusive with regards to the impeachment process that was underway in South Korea. In fact, the current president has survived the impeachment proceedings. This after there was an understanding with the opposition party, the PPP. In fact, you've had the members of the opposition walking out, enabling the president to continue, despite growing chorus essentially taking place in Seoul, calling for the impeachment of President Yoon. Let's first take you through the latest images now coming in from the capital in Seoul, where there was protests that were taking place outside the parliament. In fact, what you see right now is there was an attempt that was essentially made to heighten the situation or perhaps escalate this after a martial law that was brought in by the president. In fact, what you see right now is that this was immediately after the martial law was brought in, and thereafter you've had the military to move in. But having said that, there was a demand to impeach the president. Now, there is an understanding that was basically made with the opposition parties by the president, which has basically allowed him to continue. But having said that, the situation being the way it is right now, it perhaps is becoming untenable for the president to continue in his current position. So what does this essentially mean for the fragility of the South Korean democracy? Because in the past too, remember, a situation like this has come up. So will the president be able to survive this? And how did it all start? With the fact that there was a move that was essentially made by South Korea as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, where you've had the South Koreans basically indicating that they would like to empower the Ukrainians by providing them weaponry. This was as a response to the presence of North Korean troops on Russian soil. The trigger point essentially being one of them, but that thereafter changed. First, take a look at this detailed report explaining what's the current situation like right now in Asia's fourth largest economy and what exactly is the repercussion like. We'll go to our reporters on the ground giving you a sense of what's really happening in Seoul. But first, take a look at this report.
The South Korean President Yoon is embroiled in a significant political crisis. This comes after his controversial decision to declare martial law earlier this week.
친애하는 국민 여러분, 저는 북한 공산 세력의 위협으로부터 자유 대한민국을 수호하고 우리 국민의 자유와 행복을 약탈하고 있는 파렴치한 종북 반국가 세력들을 일거에 척결하고 자유 헌정 질서를 지키기 위해 비상계엄을 선포합니다.
Even though he apologized for his decision,
이번 비상계엄 선포는 국정 최종 책임자인 대통령으로서의 절박함에서 비롯되었습니다. 하지만 그 과정에서 국민들께 불안과 불편을 끼쳐드렸습니다. 매우 송구스럽게 생각하며 많이 놀라셨을 국민 여러분께 진심으로 사과드립니다.
the opposition has come out all guns blazing on the South Korean president.
사실 이번 계엄의 더 큰 위험성은 이 불복 계엄을 했다는 사실이 아니라 대체 아무도 이해할 수 없는 이런 계엄 결정을 내리는 대통령의 정신 상태에 있습니다.
While the ruling party maintains that an early resignation remains unavoidable.
대통령의 정상적인 직무 수행은 불가능한 상황이고 대통령의 조기 퇴진은 불가피합니다.
As South Korea spirals into a fresh political crisis, all eyes on what's yet to unfold in South Korea's political trajectory.
Well, let me first go across to Vincent, who's joining us from Seoul right now. Vincent, how did the South Korean president really avoid this entire impeachment, given the fact that the opposition was also up in arms for the impeachment of the current president? Was there some sort of an understanding that the president has had with the opposition, particularly with the PPP?
Well, yes, it was quite interesting to observe because at first we were all a bit scared, I must say, since I've lived here now for over one semester. When the message came that the martial law was instated again, we were actually quite scared. And also many Koreans actually made plans to go back home, to their actual home, not like the home of the university. And so the situation was quite severe. Then luckily, the martial law, I'm sorry, it's a bit busy here. The martial law was nullified, which made things feel safe again. And then of course the impeachment was about to come, but the president seems to have maintained an image where it enabled him to successfully, or at least until now, maintain his position and dodge this danger for him. Yeah.
Vincent, I'll just request you if you can just flip your camera and perhaps give us a sense of what's the situation like on the ground, because there were large-scale protests that were taking place. In fact, even when the impeachment process began, we were given to understand that outside of the parliament area, there were large-scale protests because people were unhappy with this entire process continuing. So give us a sense of what's really happening on the ground like. What is it like right now?
Mm-hmm. So, For example, at Yeol Park today, actually, there was quite a big protest, and it's a lot of people being on the streets and protesting. Me, as an international, I try to avoid this crowd because it's still quite dangerous and people could get looked into, and I really didn't want to have too much problems with that. Where I am right now is Apgujeong Rodeo, where life seems to be going on as usual. So here you cannot really feel all the things going on there with the president. But I can assure you, also at the universities and also at Yeol Park, there are protests going on, and it's actually, quite big. severe. So people are talking about it, and it's a big subject here to talk about. Yeah. In Korea.
Vincent, as I understand, there would be a number of international students who are also present there. Could you give us a sense of
Yes.
one, the anger among the people in Seoul, and why is it directed to the current president? How exactly did it all start?
I mean, obviously, okay, as international, sorry, there's a crowd coming here. As an international student and students, we are, of course, not native to this problem, but obviously there was the big martial law incident 70 years ago, where also the martial law got instated and many people died. It was actually pretty bad, and I think also the last president died. So people were scared here. For us internationals, since we don't really, I mean, we know what happened to that issue, but we don't really know the effects of it. We just get told to stay away from everything. Also, like from my university, for example, the manager even contacted us immediately after the martial law was instated and told us a warning that we shouldn't go on the streets. We shouldn't join protests too early, since we could get arrested, because the martial law gives that opportunity to people to just get arrested without a warrant. So as international students, we try to stay away. But the Korean people themselves, of course, they are angry at the president that he did this thing that happened that was the cause of this much trouble 70 years ago. And so they were actually mad at him, and they say that the president is, stupid is their word. Because the thing that happened 70 years ago is just way too dangerous to happen again. So people are mad at the president, yeah.
Vincent, what's the situation like right now, in the sense that now that the martial law has essentially been overturned, the president, however, remains in power at this point in time with some sort of an understanding with the opposition parties. Has the situation been brought under control in those very parts where the protests were actually taking place?
So I just know that when I arrived here, that protests were taking place. I don't know exactly if the protests are over now or if people are still standing there. Since it was a huge crowd, there might be still some people over there. But also I heard people say that about the president, that this might have consequences, that this impeachment was nullified. There might be consequences for the party or the president himself. It's really uncertain right now, since that message is very young. Right now, me personally, being here away from the protest, I haven't really felt the direct effects of this message. But there might be things coming up in the near future. Maybe against the political party, since they are the minority actually in the parliament. Against the president. But right now, it's a bit uncertain. People are still mad at him. And we will see how things play out. We have to see it in the coming days.
Vincent, one last question, because I'm presuming that you are also in touch with the locals there, the Koreans. And how exactly are they really responding? What's the approval ratings like of the current president? And does this essentially mean that in the days to come, it's going to be even more vulnerable, given the fact that the protests are unlikely? To go by your account, it's unlikely that it's going to die down anytime soon.
So the one thing I can assure you is people say that this president is stupid and crazy. They also go back to the fact that this was a former prosecutor and not a real politician. So they say he's actually, stupid for enforcing this martial law. It's obvious that many people don't really, respect him that much anymore. Even less after this event. But since he survived this impeachment until now, I believe that even though protests may go on, it may continue like this for now. There will be future votes where we will see how the effects of this message will play out. But until now, all I can just say is that people don't really like, of course, that we instated the martial law, and they don't respect him as much anymore. And we have to see how that plays out in the future. It's just that they don't like him that much anymore.
Thank you very much, Vincent, for getting us that report from Seoul, as the situation still remains quite volatile. We will be closely monitoring the situation on the ground, as this has got an immediate repercussion in the area, in the subcontinent too.
Yep.
Well, let's also now shift focus to the other international story that we're tracking tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on This Is Exclusive. Let's just take you through the details coming in as far as the Syrian civil war is concerned. It's the 2.0, which threatens the Assad regime. And whether at all this time the Assad regime will be able to repel this entire rebellion that we are seeing. The rebels have already carried out a two-pronged attack. Now this from north as well as south. Right now, the rebels are essentially moving, lightning advancement that's taking place towards Damascus, and the fact that they are looking at a strategic place called Homs. Now, if at all that is taken over by the rebels, it is going to be a difficult situation for Assad. Will the Russians really step in to protect the Assad regime as they have in the past? But having said that, there is a bigger consideration at this point in time with regards to what impact does it have in the entire area, and whether at all the other areas will be taken care of. Let's now take you through some of the details in terms of the states that have been taken over by the rebels and those who are still in the hand of Assad's army. Because in some of the cities, it turns out that Assad's army has just left the area for the rebels to actually take over. So what's the situation like currently in Syria? Take a look.
Rebels have launched a sudden and strategic offense against Assad's regime, targeting Aleppo and Damascus. This has led to renewed civil war escalations.
A vast swath of territory has come under the control of non-state actors, including Security Council-listed terrorist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and armed opposition groups, including the Syrian National Army.
As per the United Nations, this offensive has been launched by a group called the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a group which has been sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council.
This latest offensive was launched into government-controlled areas by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a group sanctioned by the Security Council, along with a broad range of other armed opposition groups. It has led to significant shifts in the front lines, and tens of thousands of civilians are at risk in a region already on fire.
Meanwhile, the Syrian side has voiced concerns about the latest developments.
إلى أبناء شعبنا الأبي الصامد بواسل قواتنا المسلحة نخوض اليوم معركة شرسة مستمرة مع أعتى التنظيمات الإرهابية التي تستخدم أسلوب العصابات، ما يضطر قواتنا المسلحة لاستخدام أساليب مناسبة في خوض المعارك من كر وفر وتقدم وانسحاب إلى بعض النقاط.
The Iranian apparatus has expressed its complete support to the Syrian government.
اگر سوریه مأمن تروریست ها بشه، با بازگشت داعش و دیگر گروه های تروریستی تهدید بزرگی رو برای منطقه ایجاد خواهد کرد و این تهدید حتما به سوریه محدود نخواهد ماند و به کشورهای همسایه سوریه مثل عراق، اردن و ترکیه تسری پیدا خواهد کرد.
Insurgents are consolidating their hold of the Syrian city of Aleppo by offering amnesty and safety assurances to government soldiers who defect to their side. Meanwhile, the United States announced that the country is closely monitoring the situation in Syria.
The United States is closely monitoring the situation in Aleppo and Idlib and are in contact with partners on the ground, hold those accountable who have perpetrated these abuses, and promote fair and equal rights and access to resources.
With the situation only escalating with every passing day, the questions remain. Will Syria's all-weather ally, Moscow, come to Assad's rescue this time? The bigger question, when will the citizens of Aleppo finally feel safe?
Well, it's reigniting the 13-year-old civil war once again, and whether at all Assad's regime will be able to perhaps sustain it this time, because the situation essentially being the way it is currently, it only threatens Assad's rule. And how exactly it all started, given the fact that Assad's key allies, starting from the Hezbollah to the Russians and the Iranians, all seem to have now been weakened with the ongoing conflicts in the other areas. Let's now take you through some of the details now coming in, and also the images now coming in. Ladies and gentlemen, the breaking news now coming in with regards to the situation on the ground. What's really happening? This is the latest now coming in with the insurgents who are basically consolidating their hold of the Syrian city of Aleppo by offering amnesty and safety assurances to government soldiers and police officers who defect to their side. In fact, they say well over 1,000 service members have already taken up the offer. That's the latest coming in. Let me now show you the visuals now essentially coming in from Syria. Now, these are attempts that are now being made by the insurgents to ensure that they have support on their side, particularly the public support coming in. That is the reason why we see this kind of line now taking place in the Syrian city of Aleppo, because that's again, the insurgents are now taking full control of the situation. The rebels have sent across a message that those who are willing to deflect, come on their side, are going to be given ID cards so that they can be protected, and they are essentially given that kind of protection from the rebel group. Let me also go across to my colleague Krutat, who's joining us, who's going to join us on this broadcast. Krutat, first, with regards to the fact that this is reigniting the 13 years back civil war that we had seen in Syria, but this time the situation essentially being very different. What's really on the ground, particularly the key allies of Assad's regime have been completely weakened with the ongoing conflict in the area. Give us first, bring us up to speed with regards to what's really happening right now and the repercussions that we're really looking at in the region.
Indeed, Shravan, and earlier this week we saw Aleppo, the biggest city in Syria, fall to the hands of rebels. Just a few minutes ago, we also got more updates that Dara and Sweda, two other important surrounding cities, are closing in towards Damascus, have also fallen into the hands of the rebels. This is also part of a strategic retreat that has been exercised by the Damascus forces or Assad's forces as of now. Now we see that Aleppo consolidation is taking place and that soldiers are indeed defecting to the other side. It is a matter of survival on the ground, but the biggest question right now, as the rebel forces close in towards Damascus and after having Aleppo and Homs also under their control, is what would Russia do? Russia has key strategic interests in the area, particularly in the form of the Tartus base, the Navy base, along with the Hemim air base. Now both of these bases are on a 47-year-old lease to Russia because of the 13 years ago when Russia intervened to defend Assad's regime in Syria. These were the two bases, a Navy base and an air base, given to Russia in return for protection rights of Assad's regime, beg your pardon. And now this strategic position of the Navy base and the air base in the Mediterranean is a very important posture for the Russians. But at the same time, Russia is also fighting a war with Ukraine, which is why the positioning as far as the Astana talks, which are also due to start, are concerned, where Iran, Russia, Turkey and UN will discuss the situation in Syria together. It remains to be seen whether Russia will be able to send in any reinforcement troops to help the Assad regime this time, especially in taking into consideration that its naval and air bases are also in the line of fire of the rebels who are closing in towards Damascus. What remains to be seen is also what will be the military response of the Assad regime and whether it will be able to respond in time, especially in the light of the larger regime change that will happen in US on 20th of January. Shawan.
Question, Krutat, with regards to the role that the Russians are going to essentially play. We saw certain statements that were made a while back, but having said that, unlike in the past, we haven't seen the Kremlin going way forward protecting the Assad regime. So what really has changed, and are we really looking at a situation where Assad has been completely isolated at this stage?
The biggest change here, Shawan, is the Ukraine war and the manner in which Russia's armed troops are already significantly embedded on the Western war front as far as Ukrainian war is concerned, because of which on an average Russia is getting about 1,500 casualties every week, and seems like Kremlin does not have enough troops to spare to send in time to Assad's rescue this time. However, earlier this week, Dmitry Peskov, one of the spokespersons for Russian President Vladimir Putin, had said that the Russian establishment is looking at the situation very closely and will take steps as far as reinforcements are concerned based on the situation. So clearly the Astana talks that are set to take place will have a huge impact on what discussions take place between Russia, Turkey and Iran vis-a-vis support to the Assad regime. However, this counter-proxy war with the rebels now coming in to the rescue of Assad is surely a matter of concern that Kremlin will be closely watching. Shawan.
Thank you very much, Krutal, for getting us the latest a story that we'll be tracking very closely. It's the situation still remains extremely fluid right now, ladies and gentlemen. Well, that's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive. Ladies and gentlemen, two stories which have got clear repercussions on the ground, and the fact that this could actually destabilize the areas surrounding. And that's the reason why this will remain on the top focus. That's all that we could pack in this edition.
Amity has been ranked India's #1 not-for-profit private university for 11th year, with top 10 ranked institutions in management, engineering, biotech, law, masscom, telecom, hospitality, fashion and more. Yet another top ranking for Amity University.
What are the 3 challenges that you might encounter?
If you look at all the other big relationships that have changed for us, look at the American relationship,